All right, joining us for a chat is leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia, Claudia Chender. Claudia, thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Indeed. Came across a story this morning on the CBC website. Nova Scotia government reviewing motor vehicle inspection requirement. Fees for MVIs in Nova Scotia range from $16 to $98. Again, the government reviewing all of this, and you have taken this a step further and suggested get rid of them altogether. Is that correct?
Not quite. We, about 6 months ago, put forward a proposal, number one, to scrap license inspection fees, which are actually far more expensive and more challenging for families to afford, and really are just a source of revenue for the government. But as part of that proposal of scrapping fees, we recommended moving the MBIs from 2 years to 5 years. I was asked yesterday if the government did away with them altogether, would you support that? My response was yes, probably, based on the fact that due to the research, MBIs aren't actually correlated with safety. Although we think that that's the case. It's not. Of course, people need to take care of their vehicles. There's no question, and there's lots of ways we can think about that. But really, what this is about, Todd, is the fact that, as we have talked about, people need a break. It is harder and harder to afford everything. And, I've been spending a lot of time in Pictou County in the last couple of weeks. And, when you get out of the city in particular, people have to drive, and they have to drive long distances. This government uses that as a kind of constant attack against the boogeyman of Justin Trudeau. And what we are saying to the government is put your money where your mouth is. If you think people need a break, if you think people need a break on driving and the cost of vehicles specifically, there are lots of ways this government can do that, starting with the expensive fees that they charge for the privilege of driving one.
All right, so reading the CBC story, it says NDP leader Claudia Chender says she would have no problem doing away with MVIs altogether. So that's a little out of context then, is it?
Yeah, like I said, our proposal, which, it's on our website, we put it forward in a bill, is to move MBIs from 2 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. The question I got from the reporter was that we are hearing that, in fact, the government is planning to do away with them altogether. Would you support that? And my response was, as I just said, yeah, probably. We'd have to look into it a little bit more. We'd have to make sure that safety is being taken into account. But again, it varies across the province. We have one of the strictest regimes at 2 years. There are more than one province right now that do not have MBIs unless you're importing a vehicle from another province. So we certainly wouldn't be the first. And, as I said, there is no correlation as you look across the country with all those different regimes and road safety. But, we thought it was a very reasonable proposal to say, well, we understand that, we've got one province at 1 year, we've got some province not at all. This would be a big cultural shift. So our proposal, which is in legislation, is 5 years.
Okay, so you mentioned there's no correlation between safety. Can you cite studies that indicate that, or where's that data come from?
I can share that with you, Todd. I think that those are just the statistics based on, fatalities, road accidents and fatalities in a province correlated with their MBI regime. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that Nova Scotia has one of the strictest regimes, and unfortunately still has a fairly high incidence of traffic accidents and road safety accidents, whereas the jurisdictions that have no MBIs in many cases actually have better statistics. So I don't think that's great. We don't ever want to see, we of course always want to be working towards safety. That's a priority. But the question is, what's the best way to do that? And, there's lots of people who are constantly advocating for changes to speed limits and, the way that we move cars and people and vehicles across our province. And I think those need a lot of attention. I guess what we found when we were looking into all of that is that MBIs don't seem to be a deciding factor in those statistics.
All right, reading the CBC story that I'm referencing, Daryl Bethune, who's operated a Surefire Automotive in Porters Lake for the past 14 years, says he favors keeping the requirement for motor vehicle inspections. Here's a quote. It says, "From what I've seen over the years of this shop and other ones that I've worked in, without MVIs, you wouldn't believe the amount of unsafe vehicles that would be on the road." What's your response to that?
I heard Mr. Bluestein on the radio, and I thought it was interesting. I mean, the other thing he proposed is maybe people should get their inspections at a kind of centralized government location and then take those inspection reports to a mechanic. I think that I'm sure that's true, but I also think that, I'm sure we all know people who drive out to a specific shop or a specific place somewhere out of the city to get the MBI that maybe they couldn't get at another shop. I mean, the reality is it's not that standardized. And so I think the vast majority of mechanics and shops are honest, and they're going to give the inspection and do the work that needs to be done. But there seems to be a wide variety of standards. So we are certainly not advocating for people not to get the work done. And it may be that people get those inspections, but there's no fee. What we are saying is that this is a government that is focused on yelling at the federal government about the need for fixes to the price to operate a vehicle when they have lots of levers at their own disposal to make that more affordable for people. And one is fees. And again, our focus has been on the license fee. So that vehicle renewal, the most expensive sticker you'll ever buy, much more expensive than an MBI. And for what? So you get a sticker to put on your license, right? That, there is nothing else required than your credit card number in order to renew that sticker. And so, there are a number of fees that we pay. Those are government revenue, and, government revenue pays for hospitals and schools and all the things we need. But often it can make the difference between people making it to the end of the month. And so, we are doing what we want the government to be doing, which is turning over every stone to figure out how people can just afford to get to work, operate their vehicle, do the things they need to do. And I think that fees are something that need to be seriously looked at.
How about a break on some taxation when it comes to gasoline as well, the provincial portion of the gas tax? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that that's a really interesting conversation to have. Again, we hear the provincial government kind of lambasting the federal government around a tax. But of course, the motor vehicle tax is a provincial tax. Other provinces have cut that tax, notably Manitoba. And certainly that would be an option for this government too. But you don't hear them talking about that. And so, I think we really need the government to understand the challenges that people are facing. I was just talking to a couple of women not 2 days ago, again, on the doorstep in Pictou, who, were saying they drive, 35 kilometers each way to work every day. And, the wear and tear that puts on their vehicle and the cost to fill that tank. And it is punitive, and it's the difference sometimes between being able to get to work or not being able to get to work or paying the bills at the end of the month. And so I think every little bit helps, and everything should be on the table.
Claudia, appreciate your time. Thank you so much as always.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia.